It's time now for our regular focus on mental health and well-being in Mind Matters with Dr. Sian.
Yeah, now anyone who has a pet will understand what a huge part of the family they can become. So when they pass away, the grief can be truly overwhelming.
Earlier, Sian spoke to journalist and writer Kate Spicer about the pain she felt after the loss of her beloved dog, Wolfie. She started by asking what Wolfie was like.
Wolfie was a rescue lurcher that I adopted in early 2015. And so I think I adopted him, he was maybe 5 or 6, nobody really knows. And I drive to a service station on the M25. This rather scruffy, weird-looking dog slopes across the car park towards me. I hand over 160 quid to the lady who rescued him. And then a week later, I'm like, oh my God, I'm so in love. It was just so shocking. I had no idea you could fall in love with an animal like that. And it only deepened and strengthened the longer and longer we were together, the more adventures we had. I even wrote a book about him after we had one particularly big adventure when he went missing for 10 days.
And what was interesting, I think, about the book...
Yeah, lost dog.
Lost dog is that absolute visceral pain you felt when you were separate, and the panic.
It was like grief when he went missing because it was so frightening. I had to find him. I had to find him, and I was completely obsessed by this and fixated on it. And probably as a psychotherapist, you would understand what was happening to me, but I'd gone into a complete state of kind of temporary madness.
And Wolfie was found.
Yeah, we got Wolfie back, which was the most amazing feeling in the world.
And your book was called Lost Dog, A Love Story.
Yeah.
Why was it a love story? What is... Because it sounds like a sort of proper relationship almost, where the way you talk about it is like a romance.
I'm a pretty normal person, but I have, I have commitment issues with men and all sorts of things like that. And I felt like I'd never had a really consistent, reliable relationship in my life. He kind of healed me. I mean, it sounds a bit cheesy, but he healed me. He kind of cracked open my defences that I'd built up over 4 decades of weathering the various storms that life throws at you. And he cracked me open and opened my heart up. And through that, I had this kind of transformative healing experience with all sorts of people. I just warmed up a bit, and life just became a bit more sparkly.
When Wolfie died in March, just you having described that relationship, that must have been really tough. How did you manage that?
I was expecting it, and I just had to go through it. But people don't talk about how raw the grief is when you lose a dog or a cat or a horse, perhaps, that you're very close to.
Did everybody understand that grief?
I didn't ask people to help me, if you know what I mean. I didn't expect. My friend's mother and father were dying at the time, and I was super conscious. She didn't want to know that I was gutted that my dog had died. She did not want to know that. She's losing her parents. But it doesn't take the absolute gasping pain of losing him away. I just kept it quite private. There were a couple of people with whom I could talk about it, but I did internalise it, and I sort of expressed it more through writing and just having massive crying sessions in my office sometimes.
Well, I guess there is a fair amount of judgment, and you write about that.
So I don't have kids, and people, I think, love to say that you get a pet to fill a gap that was never filled by children, which in some ways is true, and in other ways is not true, because the relationship you have with an animal is so different to the relationship you have with a child. Certainly, Wolfie was a receptacle for a huge vessel of love that I think is given unconditionally to children and to no one else. I don't think partners and parents get the same level of unconditional love.
Well, they can talk back in a different way, can't they?
Yeah, and they're really annoying, and they're not very cuddly. Whereas kids and dogs are really worthy of unconditional love. But, Wolfie was just an incredible dog for me. So, yeah, he was a well to be filled with love.
You learnt to love through Wolfie, and now that love is being shown in other places,
Yeah.
perhaps.
I mean, I think love creates more love.